Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing YouTube channel, and this is the other Wednesday in the month of the 2 Wednesdays in the month where we talk about marketing news with Melanie Farmer, the concierge of co-creation at Crazy Might Work. Good afternoon, Melanie Farmer.
Good afternoon.
How are you? You're looking well?
I'm very good. I'm learning a lot about possums because we have one in our roof. So
Excellent.
it's been an exciting week for possums.
Okay. How big is a possum?
Yeah, they're about the size of a household cat.
Right. Okay.
A bit bigger, maybe, a bit fatter. Yeah, they're pretty big.
They look a little bit
They
like
move.
koalas. You could also have a koala in your roof, couldn't you?
Koalas can be 5 times that size.
Oh,
You
wow.
can get 4 times maybe. You can get a big koala. And
Right.
they generally don't like roofs because there's no leaves in there, so they
Okay.
like to live in a tree. Possums
Okay.
tend to cavort about, being nocturnal at night, and then during the day they just enjoy renovating the roof cavity. So that's exciting.
Good. Okay, so that is exciting. So we're getting educated in Australian wildlife now as well. That's good. Good. It was 2 weeks ago. It was 2 weeks since we've spoken. Have you achieved anything outstanding in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, we have. We've won a number of contracts, which is really always good, and I think we have now since then walked through our marketing strategy and kind of refined it so we
Excellent.
know who we're targeting better. But more work to be done on that. But certainly, it's good to have moments of strategy success as well as operational success.
100%. I believe that 100%. And tantalizingly, you keep saying I'm going to get to have a look at this marketing strategy. Maybe that will happen one day. That would be really good. When it's perfectly refined, that's exactly when I just say, no, that's perfect. That would be good for me. That would be really good for me. Okay, cool. So it's been kind of a tumultuous couple of weeks in marketing, in the world of marketing. Has it? I don't know if it really has. There's big things happening, I think. So I'm interested to hear what you think is in the news. We've decided on only just now, because maybe we were both too lazy to actually come up with 3 stories, but we never get through 5 or 6 anyway. So I've come with 2, you've come with 2. So for you, what's exciting in the world of marketing news for you?
Yeah, and look, I think less is more. So good for us. Um, Elon buying Twitter, which was
Okay.
sort of on the cards, but seems to now have occurred.
Yes.
Um, and I kind of have an interesting way of looking at that. The second is the effect on electric vehicles of everyone now heading towards being an electric vehicle in that space,
Okay.
and
So
so
it's
sort of differentiation and that sort of thing.
okay. Cool. So it's pretty Elon focused. Yours. I've only got
Well,
2
I must say,
stories.
I
Yep.
did have a third one. You can swap out the electric, which was Netflix has now opened up for advertising, which I think is a pretty big deal and probably changes the game for many advertisers.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about that as well, because my first story was, of course, also Elon Musk now owning Twitter outright. It feels like a proper, almost like a news thing, because we said 2 weeks ago, oh, he's done this exciting thing. He spent $10 billion, whatever. And now we're coming again because he's actually bought out yesterday or today, yesterday,
Mm.
probably they're asleep in the United States right now. They bought out the entire thing. So that was my first story. And then the second story I've got is about Google. Google have made some earnings announcements, which are quite interesting. Let's just say that. So, shall we
Oh,
go first with the big news, which is Elon Musk. So I think I've got this on one of my things. So Musk gets Twitter for 44 billion. So this is as reported by Reuters. So Musk gets Twitter for $44 billion to cheers and fears of free speech plan. Elon Musk clinched a deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion cash on Monday in a transaction that will shift control of the social media platform populated by millions of users and global leaders to the world's richest person. It is a seminal moment for the 16-year-old company, which emerged as one of the world's most influential public squares and now faces a string of challenges. Musk, who calls himself a free speech absolutist, has criticized Twitter's moderation. He wants Twitter's algorithm for prioritizing tweets to the public to be public and objects to giving too much power on the service to corporations that advertise. Reuters, that might be the worst sentence I've ever read. He wants Twitter's algorithm for prioritizing tweets to be public and objects to giving too much power on the service to corporations that advertise. Okay, it might be me. Political activists expect that a Musk regime will mean less moderation and reinstatement of banned individuals, including former President Donald Trump. Conservatives cheered the prospect of fewer controls, while some human rights activists voiced fears of a rise in hate speech. Musk also advocated user-friendly tweets to the service, such as an edit button and defeating spam bots that send overwhelming amounts of unwanted tweets. So this is the news. It's big news. So I kind of want to say again, is this... how do we feel? You think you've got an interesting take on this?
Yeah. So Chris Anderson interviewed him just ahead of this moment, who's the chief executive of TED Talks.
Right.
And my take, I guess, he did sort of say, he said to Elon, he said, you describe yourself as an absolutist. And was sort of asking him his views on the board, like what happens if he does take over entirely. And Elon was sort of declaring, as he has done in the media since, that he's not got confidence in the board. But what I guess I wonder is this if freedom of speech is his absolutely place he wants to go, is this the best way to achieve it? And I noticed that Donald Trump has his own competing Twitter platform with something like 4 members so far kind of deal. It's not, but yeah, Donald Trump declared that he would never be on Twitter again and that he started his own competing platform. So I think these are all interesting things sitting around it, because to me it's saying, well, even if you did open up the world and say you're only getting banned if it's illegal. And I do like the fact that in the interview he said it's really if a lawyer determines something to be illegal, that is the reason you'd be blocked, but for no other reason. So that's definitely an absolutist and only illegal in the country in which you're operating. So it's an international company, but in America is where it's incorporated. So yeah. I guess what I'm saying is if you wanted true freedom of speech to me and you had $44 billion, wouldn't you invest that in educating people to value the freedom of speech rather than go and buy a platform that's used by 2% of the population in practice for the same amount of money? What is the difference you're going to make in both camps? So I wonder about using the money that way to achieve freedom of speech truly, because he could in fact create a competing platform. He could invest in education to value this, all of those things, and he's chosen to buy Twitter. So I think it's an interesting choice to use his money in that way.
Okay, yeah, good. So what do I think? I think if he were an absolutist, it would be absolute. You could say whatever you like, but he's not quite an absolutist, because he's saying if it is illegal, then we will have lawyers determining if it's illegal or not, and that's the only way you could be banned. What do I think? What would be the point in educating millions, billions of people to value freedom of speech, for them only then to come to platforms which aren't democratically representative, which then disallow? So this is the issue, I think, is that there are these 3 platforms. There's the Facebook mob, Meta, there's Google, and there's Twitter, and that's it. So even if Twitter is only 2% of the population, 2% of the world's population, or 2% of the US population, or 2% of
Something
what?
like 2% of the US population are actually in what you would truly describe as engaged. So
Right.
there's there's closer to 40-50%, like a lot more people registered as Twitter users who've like, I've got a Twitter account, but I'm not as active as I'm not that active. But there are, so in terms of like who is actually active, most of those people have been to college. Most of those people are in a particular demographic.
Okay.
So it's hitting like the actual engaged users. There's a very small number
Okay, so
of
I'm looking at Statista, and they're saying 206 million monetizable daily active users
in the world.
in the world.
Yeah,
So
and so that's not many. There's 900 million plus just in America.
there's
Like when you
350 million in the United States. So it is population 3 times the size of the United Kingdom. What is that? 4 times 25 times 50 times the size of New Zealand, 10 times the size of Australia. I think the point is that this is one of the three platforms, and I think the point is that the feeling is that it is these tech companies that are stifling freedom of speech. So it's not because the majority of the population don't believe in freedom of speech. It's because these tech companies have decided that they are the arbiter now of freedom of speech, and they don't need to be, because, as we've already alluded to, there are laws already that talk about what you can say and what you can't say. So as long as it's not dangerous, as long as it's not hate speech, as long as it's not those things, famously you can't scream fire in a crowded cinema, then it should be allowed. Except these three tech platforms have decided what can and can't be. So I can't imagine there is a better way, if that is his agenda. I can't imagine there is a better way of actually redressing the balance in favor of freedom of speech than actually owning one of these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, what is ironic is that it becomes that he decides who decides. So there's one person now, like there are less people now deciding what's allowed and what's not allowed. Now,
How?
saying that, in that currently there's a board of people and multiple shareholders all having to, having their say and their input into um, who gets vetoed and who doesn't, and then it gets down to like more of a monopoly. But my counter argument to that is that it's the lack of diversity in the board in terms of their views. So you might have 10 people, but they're all sharing the same view, whereas it would be better, I think, to have a more diverse board making more informed, diverse decisions about these things. And hopefully one of those has a legal bent. And so whether Elon intends to have surround himself with a more diverse board, not diverse as in racially, but diverse as in skill set and views, values, that sort of thing, like
Yes.
some level of diversity on that board.
Okay, and I think he's already saying that he's not going to be making the decisions. What he's saying is that he's going to employ lawyers who will decide if this is legal or illegal, and that's the only criteria. So I think the issue, because this has gone on for the last 2 weeks, isn't it? They were talking about Twitter taking the poison pill. So they were talking about, rather than allowing him to actually buy it outright, they would just sink the company, which is crazy. And the argument about was that is because they realized what a important forum this was, and a valuable forum beyond the value of their shares. Like, this is the major shareholders. So I can't see. I don't particularly enjoy Elon Musk. I don't think I agree with his politics if I were to listen to him. I do think they knocked up those pictures of the Tesla on its way to Mars or wherever it's going on PowerPoint. I do think that it was well established that the environmental damage in motoring was caused in the production of vehicles, and he's managed to completely sidestep that whole thing and be standing up as the bastion of the environment, even though his solution appears to be to reproduce every car on the planet. And I do think they're a bit flimsy, is what I've heard. And I do think something else about him. But I don't think there is a single argument against him owning Twitter. Like, and anyone who argues, because he's already said if it's illegal, it's disallowed, you don't get to be on the platform. That's the criteria. So that should be the criteria, and it shouldn't be political. So I would say, where is the diversity at Google? Where is the diversity at Facebook? There isn't. Where is the diversity in News International? There is no diversity in any of these things. The only distinction here is that this guy stood up and said, I'm a freedom of speech absolutist. That's what this is now about. And I think Twitter is the perfect mechanism for that, because I'm also not an active user because it gives me a headache. But I think what he's done, so I don't think the freedom of speech thing is his only criteria, his only reason for being here. He's also invested in one of the only three global social media platforms. You know what I mean? He now owns it outright. So I think there is a commercial imperative here as well. And then if there is a commercial imperative, then what he's doing is he's saying to all of the Trump supporters, your grandstander is back on our platform. Welcome home. Do you know what I mean? And Trump doesn't need to run his own platform anymore. And so it becomes much more open. So if we take it from a marketing perspective, and it's huge news, so it's getting huge awareness now again. So I think commercially it's a great decision. I think morally we do need more freedom of speech. I don't think people should be shut down unless it's absolutely illegal. Then they shouldn't be shutting people down. So I think commercially it's a good decision. I think if his thing is freedom of speech, then I think it's a good decision. I can't think of a single argument against it unless you are so woke that you don't want people to be saying things you don't like. And then that is actually dangerous. If there is no freedom of speech, if people aren't allowed to say what they like, then things get ugly,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and look, I think my comment about educating people about valuing and understanding what they're reading and allowing people to have a view that isn't my own, and being comfortable in the uncomfortableness of that. I guess I am just sort of thinking we tend to surround ourselves with an echo chamber and just vilify those who don't agree with us. And Twitter is a place where you can say 10 words, so that it's kind of flawed because you're simplifying really complex views.
Yes.
Even if someone's got a link and you can go and read further, it's very easy to misinterpret. So,
Is this
and
what
people are making decisions and voting based on what they're reading, whether it's true or not.
Well,
So,
it's not true. Is I think what's been demonstrated is that these platforms. I'm social. I'll tell anyone who will listen. I'm a revolutionary communist. I really believe that we will evolve to a much more just society where it will be managed from each according to their abilities, to each according to their needs, whatever that thing is. That's where I am politically. But there's a weird representation of social justice going on, which is, just weird, and it is just weird. So,
yeah,
and even when you say like educating people, like a free speech absolutist would say, you don't educate people into what to think. Do you know what I mean? People think what they think. That's valid. So unless
I
it's
think
illegal.
because I didn't go to a normal school. I went to a more of a Montessori Steiner school where you're taught
Right.
how to think, not what to think. So when I say you're taught how to think, you study many, many different forms of philosophers so that you learn
Yep.
how to think. So it's no accident that I'm in a company that teaches breakthrough thinking, but it's actually like right now, education, it tends to teach you what to think. Around the world over, that tends to be the thing. That this grass is green, flowers are red. All of that. And there's a lot of prescriptive what you're going to study. So you study dinosaurs in grade 3. You study, your country's history in grade 4, and so forth. It's very, there's a whole science around what and when you teach those things. And this is the thing that happens in this classroom, is that somebody asks a question and there's a cartoon of the teacher saying, I always get the troublemakers, which is because someone asked a question. So I feel like freedom of speech is not allowed in the classroom, nor is it valued. In fact, teachers are told to shut it down, and mass education is that has come from the idea that we're going to decide what it is that you're going to learn. You're going to get the right answer, and then you will get further in life. And the way you get somewhere in life is by having the right answer. So that doesn't teach you how to think. It teaches you what to think. And so if I had this money and I wanted freedom of speech, that's where I'm coming back to. I would invest in helping the education system to understand what freedom, because freedom of speech comes out of freedom of thought. If I haven't been exposed to more than one way of thinking and one rule of thumb, and about how life works and what's important. I mean, just on a basic level, Mother's Day is when you make a Mother's Day card in class, but more and more of us don't have mothers. There's people whose mothers have died. It's very difficult for teachers because they kind of try and find that maternal figure in your life, and you make a card for them. But, we have Anzac Day, which has just happened here in Australia, which is sort of a memorial to those who died in World War II. But if you look at that, we have a lot of Turkish residents in Australia who are now citizens of Australia, but their heritage is Turkish. Are they the enemy? Because in the war they were. So Anzac Day is a funny thing to sort of try and navigate when you have technically merged these two societies together. How do you navigate that? And the curriculum is really quite, this is what you're going to think. Australians are good, Turkish are bad. They are the bad guys. And so that's where I think, well, there ought to be, more done on teaching children how to think rather than what to think. And that then later, if we understand and we know how to think, we're going to read any of this stuff and have a really quite diverse view on things, be able to look at, understand, and say that may or may not be true. We may be able to read other opinions, and we like to read those, as opposed to categorizing each tweet. That's my tribe, that's not my tribe. So you're an idiot because you don't agree with me. You're a genius because you agree with me. And I'm not saying that's actually as simple as what everybody does, but I do think if you have that ability to engage more with something that causes you dissonance, then the experience and value of freedom of speech increases.
Okay, and I agree with everything you've said, apart from I don't think this is an education issue. I think the issue is, like you say, it's become so ridiculously partisan. Either you're in this camp or you're in this camp. And the issue is that the tech companies are in this camp. So if you're in that camp, you haven't got a platform at all. So the way I would think, and I would say the thing about this is that what he has done is he's bought the dam. Do you know what I mean? There's 3 dams that are policing what gets said and what doesn't, and he's bought 33% of them. Do you know what I mean? Probably not actually 33%. Yeah. And so I think that's really interesting. And what's also interesting is that he was never previously some bastion of right-wing thinking. But now they have managed to frame him as that. So now all the liberals or the woke people are like running like freedom of speech, we can't have it. And that's not. I would say freedom of speech is plumb and center, like it's in the middle. Do you know what I mean? That's where we begin. Anyone can say anything they like as long as it's not dangerous, hateful, causing harm, that's where we start. And then, that's where it comes from. So I think from a marketing perspective, this is a brilliant thing that he's done, because he's just now saying, essentially, like the radical left, they're not radical left, they are a bit uppity, but they're not radical left. But then maybe they'll vacate, and that's absolutely fine, because what he's got is the whole of the middle and the whole of the right that can now come into the platform. So I think from a marketing perspective, this makes it a more marketable thing. It's like you are now going to reach everybody through these platforms, through this particular platform, rather than this one.
Yeah.
And from a media perspective, he's just opened it up to literally 50% of the population. Like Trump, like him or loathe him, he's what do they call it? He's grand. He's centerpiece. He's the star of the show. Do you know what I mean? He comes back to Twitter.
Yeah.
Tens of millions of people come back to Twitter. Do you know what I mean? So I think commercially, it's a really sound piece of business. It astonishes me that they do $4 billion in sales, and he's bought it for $44 billion. I don't think it's ever supposed to be 10 times like turnover is how you value a business. Obviously, this is happening on the stock market, but he will make money on this as well, because what he's saying is right. It's full of spam. That's why I don't look at it. It's because, for every one tweet you read, you will be bombarded with another 100 robot-derived things. So what was the other thing? The things that he wanted to do. So bring people in. Twitter is the discussions over the deal. User-friendly tweaks to the service, such as an edit button and defeating spam bots. It's just common sense. Just do that. Do you know what I mean? Rather than say, we can't have people saying what they want to say because that's dangerous. Actually, no, that's all taken care of in the law. Everyone knows what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. And because it's defined, it's actually in the Constitution, I believe, of the United States. Oh, no, I'm confusing that with something else. But it's, everyone knows what's legal and what's not legal. And if it's not legal, then you don't say it, you don't have a platform. But as long as it's legal, then this is the tyranny of these platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Google, where they decide what people can say and what people can't say. And at the same time, they're deciding who gets elected and who doesn't get elected. Do you know what I mean? That's a dangerous situation, really dangerous. So I think I don't enjoy Twitter. I don't enjoy Elon Musk. I don't enjoy Donald Trump. But this, I think, is genius from Elon Musk. I think I can't see, there isn't a single argument against this, other than I don't want people saying.
Yeah,
what's that?
I don't. Everything that he has verbally said about it as well, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, who knows? We don't know. But I do feel like, he's not said there are 10 reasons. He's really said there's one.
Yes.
He's even said it's not economic. Whether it is or not, verbally, he is saying very strongly, this is about, if it's not illegal, why are you stopping this person? And there's been famous interviews with the Jack Dorsey and others asking them point blank, why have you banned this person? Why have you banned
Senate
this person?
hearings. It's like not just interviews. It's like literally, this is a problem. So, yeah.
And they've kind of skirted around the answer and said, we'll take that on notice, which I think is, kind of a testament to the problem that he's highlighted, which is that if it's people are saying things that you don't agree with, your platform isn't living up to what it's supposed to be doing. You're now filtering opinion out, and if you don't like it, and to appease those, whatever reason. But it seems to me like I've heard it said that Twitter represents the centre and left of centre. So it's even the centre right. There's some that it's alienated. Unless you agree there's 1,000 genders and whatever else. Like, there's a whole lot of things to unpack with that. But the centre is becoming further and further left, and that's kind of where it's landing. So it's alienating more than, let's say, 50%, I think. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
more.
even just people who are, centre-right who can't express their views on there. And it's not to say, but it's like if these people exist and they're voting, why are they unable to be heard? Is that fair? Do we want to have here's a platform, we're gonna
Wait,
have the
wait,
Twitter to
wait, wait,
right,
wait.
Twitter left?
What if you have been elected the president of the United States then? Does Twitter really get get to shut you down, like to stop you from talking
Well,
to your
it's
hundreds of
other things
millions
that
of followers?
right, and if you're saying things that are illegal, that's a different matter. And if you're doing that and you're the president, then we probably should be having other actions be taken.
Yes, but
But
that hearing has happened, and it's been established that he didn't say anything that was illegal. So
yeah,
but
so
but this
that's the
is yeah.
and just because you disagree and whatever, that's where I think that deep down it comes to feeling comfortable with you know just it's wielding power. That I think this is where I like what Elon is saying, that you're wielding power in a way that is shutting down these views. And not to say this is why this has happened, but when you look to Putin and Ukraine and all of that, there's a lot of like, just shut it down. 10 years later, it's going to explode. So just shutting something down isn't actually the answer. These views are not disappearing anyway. So it's, to my mind, you're probably going to diffuse that wall of unspoken tweets by saying, get in there and say what you want to say.
Yeah. Well, I
Shutting it
think
down is the less successful strategy to actually shutting down those views in the long term, if you wanted to do that,
yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, but I think this is the absolute argument for freedom of speech, isn't it? Is that if somebody's saying it, they're in the open saying it, and if they're denied the right to say it, they're in their basement making bombs. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's
Well, yeah,
why
that's
we
a
have
legitimate.
this.
At a very simple level, Will Smith, had he just sat there and let Chris Rock say what he likes, we wouldn't be talking about Will Smith. We're talking about Will Smith because he had a massive
I'm not
reaction.
talking about Will Smith. You're talking about Will Smith. I'm
No,
over
I'm
it. He's
talking
an
about.
idiot. He committed an offence. He should have been arrested right there and then. That's what I think about
But
Will Smith.
had he sat there and said, let's in this example, Chris Rock is Twitter. If he'd have sat there and let Twitter do what it likes and just said nothing, it would have just floated by and we're all fine. And we'd have forgotten all of this. Because instead he jumped up and tried to shut that down and say, do not say this, that, the other.
Yeah.
The next thing you know, his career's in jeopardy. So, in actual fact, not shutting it down is a good idea in some cases, particularly if it's not illegal.
In every case, if it's illegal, then we have the law. In every other case, it's not illegal. Do you know what I mean? And if it's hate speech or if it's directing harm or inciting harm, all of these things are taken care of, in the laws in every country on the planet. We don't need Twitter to come along and say, okay, but we've got this harassment thing. We don't quite fancy what this person's saying, so we're going to call it harassment. Do you know what I mean? And for different reasons around the war, there is a whole also silencing going on about if you have different opinions, you're not allowed to be heard. And I think that's also as literally dangerous. What's happening now is that's probably going to prolong the war because people are getting a biased opinion of what's going on, So, yeah. So I think hats off to Elon. I'm not a fan. I really don't enjoy him. Here's what I think about Elon Musk is if he did put that Tesla in space, he is the first individual to pollute space because there's no reason for there to be a Tesla in space. Do you know what I mean? Like governments might have done it. Corporations might have done it. He's the first individual to have polluted space. And his PR is so amazing that he does that. And then he overcomes the pollution, the pollutional cost of motoring is the production. And his plan is, look, we just reproduce every car on the planet. Anyway, but I think hats off in this instance. I think he's done an amazing thing. He will make a shit ton of money. He always makes a shit ton of money. And he is basically opening up this platform to everybody again. You know, and people on the left who don't like it, they can exercise their right not to be there. They can do that, but what he's doing is giving freedom to everyone to be there or otherwise.
I would say, last point from me is how he kind of showed no confidence in the existing board. To my mind, that is kind of unfair, I think. Now, I don't know ins and outs. I don't know these people personally, but Parag Agrawal, who's the current CEO, his PhD in Stanford in 2012 was titled "Incorporating Uncertainty in Data Management and Integration." Interesting. He's an interesting guy, and he came through as a technical pathway to now being the CEO when Jack Dorsey stepped down from that position very suddenly.
Yes.
So I think you've got an interesting new CEO who's been there for like a year, and then this happened. So I do wonder, I mean that board are not. I don't know them intimately, but I don't feel like they have done a bad job.
I do.
However, I
I
am
feel like
very
they've done
much
well. The proof.
representing, yes, absolutely. But in terms of like it's a decent platform and this and that, but saying that it's success isn't just growth and profit. Success is also the heart of it is what we've been talking about, is actually making it a platform that represents the people as opposed to the people that I like.
Yeah. And we will know now because it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to tank or it's going to make a shit ton of money. Do you know what I mean? And that's the only way we will know if they were doing a decent job or not. I would say not, because they've created a platform which is basically exclusive to people who hold the same views as them. Do you know what I mean? And that, I think, is not the point of media. That is not the point of a media business. Successful because it's clearly been valued. It's been sold at 10 times their turnover. So, that's hugely successful. But I think...
Yeah,
I think Elon Musk is just about to make another shit ton of money. That's what I think.
Yeah, you just wonder how much the board drove it in the direction that it's gone in, which I suspect is a lot if Elon's to be heard on that, and how much they have allowed themselves to be hijacked, thinking about recent conversations we've had about L'Oreal and others, allowed themselves to be hijacked by their own users. So
Yes.
sometimes the customer isn't always right. And maybe this is the time, So those customers who are saying you have to block this person and that person, and I'm going to put complaints in about this person, as the provider of the service, do you say, I'm sorry, it's not illegal, their Twitter stands?
Yeah, 100%.
So
That's
I
what you
wonder
say.
if they've allowed themselves to be hijacked, or how much they've decided, we don't care what customers say, we want to block these people.
Okay, and I think on that, because like we're talking about left and right, but the truth is left and right is gone. Like left and right refers to class politics, and now what we're talking about is, I think, the left, the proletariat. Are they the proletariat, or they're not the bourgeois? Whoever they are, like the working class.
Just talk about it as a spectrum. We're on the spectrum of politics.
Yeah, no, for me it's like a circle, but left and right refers to class politics. It refers to the rich versus the poor. But now the left has also, I think, been undermined by gender politics, by race politics, by all of these different things that are going on, which I think undermine it. Because for me, the people who still need representation are the working class, are the poorest in society, irrespective of whether they are female or male or black or white or whatever colour they are. Do you know what I mean? So actually, I don't think it's even sensible to talk about class politics anymore, because it's not class politics now. It's more race politics and gender politics. And actually, there's no representation for the poorest people in society, which is what the left traditionally is supposed to refer to. But this has got way too political.
Well, we just need Ricky Gervais screening tweets, I think, because he knows what's legal and what's not. Because he says I've never been charged, like I've never been convicted, because he said, I know the law, I know exactly what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say legally.
He doesn't know the law. He doesn't know the law. I can't stand Ricky Gervais. Okay, good. Right,
So we should definitely move on.
We should definitely move on. I think hats off to Elon Musk. I think this might be the soundest thing he's ever done. I think he's done some really
I
quite
might
dodgy
actually
things.
go back and see what's happening on Twitter in a month. Let's see. Whereas I
You might.
pretty much stayed up.
Okay, let's go to your second story. What's your second story? I'm going to look it up so we can see the actual. Have you got the headline?
Okay, Netflix. So I kind of, I'm just asking, what does this mean for advertisers? It's kind of interesting. So Netflix, what's the headline? I have a link here. Hang on. Netflix is finally open to ads.
Okay.
That's the title.
That's the headline.
That's the headline.
I've got it at Ad Week. Ad Week. Are they going to let me see all of it, or am I going to read 8% of it and then want me to subscribe? View subscription options. No, thank you. Ad Week. Marketing dive.
That's it.
Okay, so here we are. Do we want to look at this?
They've been very anti-ads since inception. So it's a pretty big deal to kind of do a bit of a U-turn on that, and they're kind of saying they're framing it that they want to give consumers choice rather than they want to give consumers an ad-free experience. But they have had they've had ridiculous growth over several years, and then suddenly had a kind of reasonably large sort of starting to drop off. And I suspect that's because we're now going outside of our houses for the first time in 2 years. And I suspect the growth can be attributed to the fact that we were in our house with nothing else to do for some time. It's a big shift for them. I don't know what this is going to mean, but I'm guessing they'll say, well, Netflix is free, but you've got to watch ads, a bit like how the Spotify platform works. And then if you pay, you won't see the ads. I don't know. So that could be what happens.
Yeah, so what they're saying here, after losing subscribers for the first time in over a decade, the streamer's change of heart has ramifications for advertisers and the ad tech industry. Those who have followed Netflix know that I've been against the complexity of advertising, a big fan of the simplicity of subscription. Co-CEO Reed Hastings, what a name, Reed Hastings, said on the earnings call. But as much as I'm a fan of that, I'm a bigger fan of consumer choice and evolving marketplace. The course correction comes just weeks after CFO Spencer Newman said advertising was not currently in the company's plans, but seemed to open the door to a change by warning, never say never. The abrupt shift could reflect Netflix's recognition that the streaming space it has dominated for years is evolving and that the company needs to change with the times if it is to remain a key player. Okay, what do you think?
Well, look, Disney launched in the last 2 years. We all went in lockdown and madly subscribed to lots of things, including Netflix and Disney. So digital content creation and creators and platforms have just been popping up all over the place. I guess I just think it's interesting because some of our clients work in the ad-free content space.
Yep.
And these are government free-to-air providers. There are still places on the planet where the only option is free-to-air. So there's a lot of things going on in here. But I do think it's an opportunity for anyone to be thinking, any company, what does this mean for you? Because if that's another channel, literally, where because you can target very successfully in Netflix, but you know exactly what people watch. Do you know what they're going to do? Like, I mean, if there's a cooking show, do you sell cooking utensils there? So it's certainly very targetable, and also you know how old people are. it's like Facebook, only in another way. You know that they're binge watching travel shows every day. You know what I mean? There's a lot of data there, so you can target. The question is, will it work? Will people happily consume? I don't know, but I mean, look, it's not so long ago that we were just dealing with free to air with ads all the time, and maybe it's, yeah, I know it's interesting. It's interesting specifically for those who are still holding fast to no ads.
Yeah, I
What's
think.
the world?
Yeah, I think it's not particularly targeted. It's not targeted in the way that Facebook was, because all you've got is the content they're consuming. So it could be, ad placement would be relevant to the content. So that's okay, that's fine. But I can't remember when I signed up to Netflix how much information they wanted from me. I don't think they really wanted much more than my email address and my credit card number, So I don't know if it is as targeted as that. And I've recently started paying Google $10 a month or whatever. Not Google, yeah, Google, YouTube, $10 a month, because I finally got completely sick of the advertising. People hate adverts. People hate adverts. Do you know what I really think? So YouTube have gone the other way. They've gone from free to ad to subscription. And Netflix are going the other way, from subscription, it will be ad, and then something will have to be free. Do you know what I mean? To get people into the top of the funnel. I think.
The first episode of Friends, and that's it.
What's that?
And then you can get the first episode of Friends for free.
Yeah, or you get the first 4.5 minutes of every episode for free, and then you have to pay or whatever.
Right.
So I just think this is a symptom of these bloated, actually not commercially viable businesses. Because I don't know, because I haven't thought about this, but I'm pretty sure Netflix have done their trousers in the production of all of these programs. I don't think they've ever been particularly profitable. And it seems like all of these businesses get to a point where we think they're geniuses because they've monetized this service. No one ever thought of it. And then it turns out that actually they weren't. They never were paying their bills. Do you know what I mean? So
Well, I think the ambition to have continual growth is the danger. Like you don't know what saturation is until it appears. And right in the middle of all of this, in the last 2 years, Disney showed up, and that isn't to be sneezed at, because they would have taken their content and put it in the Disney Channel, which is a significant amount of content. You've got all the Marvel stuff, all the Disney stuff. So if you're a Netflix subscriber and you're a parent and you're also subscribing to the Disney Channel, well, you might as well just stick with the Disney Channel if you had to choose, because really all of the Disney and Pixar and Marvel films are in that platform, and there's plenty for you as well. There's all the back catalogue stuff they've got. There's a huge amount of things that you can watch, so you don't need Netflix now. And Netflix isn't cheap. Disney has entered the market, $4 cheaper per month. There's that's in Australia, but so I think that they're now getting where they're losing customers. They've got a pretty good culture. They've got some good leaders. Perhaps it's a good move. I know that if I was watching my tidying up show, which I get obsessed by, I would pretty much for sure buy the containers that they put stuff in to tidy up with.
Yeah.
And if I could do that on my TV, I don't even have to Google anything. So, there's certainly good opportunities to sell to me, and depending on the show that I'm watching.
Yeah, 100%. And they've already got your credit card details, so you wouldn't even have to do that. You could just go, I want that, and it could happen. Yeah.
I'll explain to my husband later, vice versa.
I was drunk. It was the cooking show.
You're enjoying that turkey?
Yeah. So if it was more of an affiliate thing, so the models are there: advertising, subscription, affiliate. The thing is, I think everyone realizes that this stuff has to be paid for now. Here's what I'm thinking now as you're talking. Am I a happy media consumer in 2022? I'm actually really not. I subscribe to Netflix. I barely watch it. There are other people in the house who watch it and people on other islands who watch it. But I'm not happy. Like 95% of what I consume is on YouTube. And it's not even like entertainment stuff. It's like really factual stuff. It's quite political stuff. It's like, so I don't, and I was thinking this before we had this conversation. I was thinking this like yesterday is what I do essentially is like historically you'd have put the TV on, crashed on the couch, and flicked until you found something that was tolerable and tolerated it until it ended. And then, do you know what I mean? It was a much more submissive kind of media experience.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have to go and find stuff. And I think what ends up happening is that you just become funneled into a very particular type of content that you just consume over and over and over again. And I don't think that's particularly healthy. I've got an issue with this. I've got a head full of issues. I think digital has stolen the sense of occasion that we grew up with when we were engaging in media. Like there would be a movie on the TV, everyone would have watched it. There will be a song in the charts, or there would have been a snooker file, and everyone watched it. Do you know what I mean? So there was much more community around the consumption of media now, whereas now it's so much more diverse. That isn't going on. I remember being in middle school, Enter the Dragon was on, everyone was throwing kung fu moves in the playground the next day. Everyone. Do you know what I mean? Because everybody had a choice of 4 things and watched this one thing. So we all came together around that thing the next day. I remember being at secondary school when snooker was huge in the UK. Everyone would come in talking about the snooker on the day of the final. I remember my dad coming to me and saying, Martin, in 3 weeks, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is on TV and you and I are going to sit up and watch it. And we sat up till the news came on and then we carried on watching it after the news had finished. You know what I mean? It was an occasion in our lives. And I think that's something that's gone on. And I'm not a happy consumer. I can download all of these movies for free. I don't because I don't know. I don't think the way we're consuming media in 2022 is particularly useful. And if I was to think about it for a second, I would say that's maybe why these now monolithic corporations find it hard to consume themselves, because they're not really satisfying the consumer. There we go. We brought it back to a marketing type issue. Now, how many subscriptions do I need? If I want to see a lot of stuff, I need to subscribe to however many sports channels, however many movie channels, however many, do you know what I mean? How much money? Whereas I think, because I'm old, the old system worked where everything would come to you. You just have to wait. It will come to you when it comes to you. Whereas now everything's available to you all the time, but it's just you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as well as the challenge of not having people all watch the same movie, go to school the next day and talk about it, is the last 2 years where there wasn't a school to go to because we were in lockdown. So, we're pretty challenged in various ways in the last 2 years. But I love it. I'm enjoying just typing in 3 letters and the movie of my dreams appears because I'm looking for that film. And then I have a pay-as-you-go, like Spider-Man No Way Home we watched the other day, which is not on Netflix or Disney, but yet. But, so all the latest blockbusters you can buy via Telstra in Australia, and so you can buy whatever film I want and just live stream it. And
Yes.
The experience of that streaming has suddenly sorted itself out, at least in my country, which is apparently some steps behind Romania in internet, levels of usefulness, but
Really?
quality and whatever. Yeah, but look, I think I like where it is at. I do wonder what's going to happen with advertising, but I think it's an opportunity for companies, bottom line, to get in there as first, but to not be annoying. Like, I really think the advertising in general, in my experiences, feels like an interruption to my life, uninvited. However, as a kid, ads were ads, and that was just part of watching television. There'll be ads, and that's what it was. So I think that it's a challenge to advertisers to be extremely useful and find your niche and not come across as an interruption. I would rather they were sponsoring shows and they just quietly did that, than that they were pumping ads out. But in the same breath, if it's the right product and they put it in the right place, I would happily buy that thing at the end of watching the show, because
Yeah.
I've already given an hour of my time to see someone cook with a particular saucepan. Chances are I'd be happy to buy that. So it's there for the pickings, and I think it's an interesting turn of events, because they have famously been no ads, that's their deal, no matter what.
Yeah.
And here they're doing this. So it's a lesson, I guess, if for anyone is looking at the digital world.
Yes. Here's what I think. I think people hate ads. Like, I subscribe to Spotify, but I don't listen to Joe Rogan anymore because he dumps his own ads in the middle of it now. And I'm paying not to have ads. So unless somebody says to me, this episode is amazing, go and watch it, and they haven't done recently, I am no longer watching Joe Rogan, and I watched him kind of religiously for a few years because I hate ads. So here's what I think is actually what goes on is the advertising offering is a gateway for people to come and start consuming the ads. What will happen is they will get annoyed of the ads very quickly, and then they'll start paying the subscription. So I think that's kind of the business model. I think you're partly right. Like, the Netflix audience are shelling out whatever it is, $10 US, £10, whatever it might be, 20 Australian, I don't know. You know, so they are shelling that out every month. So it's an audience with money. Like, very poor demographics aren't investing in Netflix.
Yeah, and then what they might do is keep it at that level, but then try to introduce another level, like at the level you're at, ads are happening. If you want to have no ads, you now have to pay an extra amount to turn those ads off.
So that's what it sounds to me. They're not doing away with the subscription. Like, the subscription is still there. But you're right. There's affiliate, there's sponsorship, there's ads, there's subscription. You know, there's ways of making money. And I just think it's kind of interesting, because I'm not a happy consumer. I think it's kind of interesting that maybe they're not making as much money as they need to make. Oh, but you're right. It's not got anything to do with the money they make. It's satisfying the shareholders, and it's a continual share price. This is exactly what's going on with Elon Musk and Twitter, is the share price is actually bears no reflection on the value that they're adding to the world. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the unenviable climb they're on.
Like Disney, Marvel, Pixar, that's the trifecta. To not have that content on Netflix, that's like not having the Beatles on Spotify. It's pretty bad news. You know, you kind of need to have Disney, Pixar, and Marvel on your platform. Otherwise, you definitely are competing with that platform. And so they, of course, Netflix have other things. They are making and syndicating their own content and so forth. And that stuff's super popular and all good. But there is a lot of content that that's just missing from there.
And I think their heyday is behind them, to be honest. I think what was the Pablo Escobar, the drugs thing, Breaking Bad, was that a Netflix thing? You know, that was their nadir. That was when they were really rocking it. And I don't remember the last time, like this Korean thing, what was that? With the music, whatever it is, I don't know. Everyone said go and watch that, and I watched some of it, and I didn't enjoy it at all. Squid Game, yeah.
Yeah, which was really short. That was like 8 episodes or something.
Yeah. Like, I'd watched about 1.5.
And look, they don't have like Doctor Who and some pretty major things they don't have by way of content. So I think there's a real kind of challenge with that.
Yeah.
Whereas before, because you think Disney, that's literally a year and a half or something that Disney's even been around as its own platform.
Yes.
So they are going to be nervous, because Disney, in their very first year, some ridiculous number, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I've got a slide deck on it, of the growth they had and the profit they made in year one. Because they're also all their back catalogue. You can watch the very first Mickey Mouse cartoon. I mean, that thing is going to be addictive for some time. There's a lot of content on there.
Yes.
You can just Can you imagine parents with their kids going, right, we're going to watch the entire series of Goofy from 1960, whatever, that we're doing this.
Yes.
So it's got the making of everything. There's a lot of stuff on there that is very unique to that world, but it's got Frozen. So that is already like,
Yeah.
you not have that on Netflix. So, but I do think,
Pirates
they
of the
have to.
Caribbean is all Disney as well, is it? Like all of
Yes.
those. Yeah, so
Yep.
there's lots. Yeah, I think it's interesting. And the good news for marketers is there will be somewhere else to advertise. Um,
Will Disney take advertising? I wonder. Right now, no ads on Disney. So
I
we'll
think
see.
when they get to the point where a single shareholder sneezes, then they'll take on advertising a second. I think that's the way it works.
Well, you can't buy, Frozen character costumes for your kid on the Disney Channel, but they've got enough merchandising that could well be the pathway that they go. If I could buy
Yeah, yeah.
my kid a Frozen princess costume, then direct from Disney, I can't imagine they're not thinking about that already. But yeah, it's a signal. This is where it's going with these media platforms.
100%, yeah. And Disney's got its own issues, hasn't it? Down in Florida, they're coming under attack from the state of Florida. So that will be interesting as well. Let's march on. Okay, my third story. This is a very short one. It's not particularly. How do I do this? So, that way, and then that way. Google Alphabet earnings. So the story is, this is from Investopedia. Basically, Google made a shit ton of money. Blockbuster year, $257.6 billion. More than $250 billion annually. $257.6 billion. The key driver for this growth has been rising demand for digital advertising spaces. More people have spent greater amounts of time online during the pandemic. Investors will be watching to see blah, 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 blah. And this is only here because, why is this here? Because, I like to celebrate the fact that these huge monopolistic corporations are going to fall. That ain't going to fall anytime soon, is it, Google? $250 billion in a year. And this, I think, comes back to what we're saying about Elon Musk, is I think there's clearly space if you are in the digital advertising space to make a shit ton of money,
Yeah, I mean, they've got to. Saying that, it's expensive to be that big. So, they're facing more and more litigation that they've got to just defend. They've got more and more trademarks and whatnot to protect. It's expensive to protect a brand. So it sounds like a lot of money, but they also have a lot of operating expenses.
Melanie, $250
They
billion
could have
is
bought,
a lot of money. Come on.
they could have bought Netflix. Who was it? Twitter. They could have bought Twitter 3 times
They could have
if they
bought Twitter
called.
6 times. 243,
So
40 divided by 6 to 20.
uh-huh.
They could have bought it 5 times
So
with their turnover.
saying that profit is rolled up from countries around the world, right? So it's $1 billion here, there, wherever they are located and so forth. And yeah, I mean, I would say they're not in trouble. I think that it is interesting to see where they are getting traction in countries they weren't really having traction in before, as those platforms start to kind of, I guess, not degrade, but they're getting their foot in the door as the search engine of choice in more and
Yes.
more countries.
And what's the word? Thingy, and they're developing different products, diversifying. That's the word that I'm looking for. So
Yeah,
yeah, I don't think a company. I mean, this is the difference. Twitter does $4 billion, Google 257 million. So there's, and even Facebook. I
billion.
don't know what billion. Yeah, $250 billion.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any danger for Google for falling over. I mean, is that the high? I mean, if you look at Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. His car company doesn't make sales of 257 billion. Do you know what I mean? So, this is the difference between these things that are hugely overvalued on the stock market, Twitter, Tesla, other businesses. Google is quietly pocketing $250 billion. That's insane amounts of money. I mean, in terms of like countries, it'll be interesting to look at like the GDP of country. It must be, if it were a country, this is the comparison we always made, it would
Yeah.
be in the top 5 countries in the world. You know, what countries have more cash than that?
Yeah. Well, there was a video about that in back in the early 2000s, wasn't there? 2006, I think. Comparing, and even then, it was saying if Google were a country, if Twitter were a country, etc. There was all
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
actually
So
revolving
populations,
around.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It would be the same of X and Y.
So
It's a
interesting.
lot of
That's It's a lot of power, and Google really is power because I'm seeing Google being the winner in this Apple Facebook war, because basically all the targeting you could do on Facebook, the only place you can come close to that now is on Google. And I think a lot of Facebook budget is going to be going to Google. So I see Google going in one way, really. Like you say, they are facing a lot of litigation, a lot of challenges. They're having to look after their brand, but they're also not noisy like Twitter or Facebook. Do you know what I mean? They're just kind of going about it. And yeah, so when the European Union decides that they're not allowed to have analytics happening in Europe anymore, they give them $5-8 billion or something, and the European Union thinks that's a shit ton of money, and Google just currently goes on its way, you know. So yeah, so that's it. Okay, which brings us then to your last story, Mel, and we're actually getting through all
well,
the stories.
I think we're good. What did I say? Was
You
about
said
um, yeah. 1 second. It's a small one, hopefully little.
good.
It was just interesting about electric vehicles. So I don't know if you've read the book Purple Cow by Seth Godin.
I did read that
Basic,
book in about 2008.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of in that vein. So what has happened is the electric vehicle market is like the purple cow now. It's purple brackets electric. All the cars are electric. So
Yeah,
what do you do when all the cars are electric? And it's an interesting one for Tesla, I
petrol.
guess. You put it in space, I suppose, is what you do. But so they're trying. So Tesla is being viewed as a brand disruptor, and we've just had the Consumer Electronics Show this week, and what in America, and so there's two branches happening with the car industry. One is doubling down on the heritage car, like our car is a grunt car, it's petrol, and that's good, and we love that. So there's this heritage petrol guzzler sort of double down story about tradition happening in the brands with cars, and then everyone else is trying to differentiate themselves with the fact that now everyone's electric. What does that actually mean? So, like Mercedes-Benz has just revealed a sporty Vision EQ XX, it is, concept car about long-range travel. Chevrolet is trying to talk about this, an electric version of its famous Silverado pickup, and so on. But what's interesting is how do you differentiate your brand when all the brands are purple in that analogy? Like in this case, if everything's electric, you can't say we're electric. You're now a follower. What are you going to do that's different? So it's interesting just watching the, I guess, considered responses of these very established brands in not losing themselves to that. I've been hijacked by Tesla, so now I've just got to, that actually seem to be intentionally doing something different.
Yeah. What do I think? I think this is a PR heist that's gone on. I don't think that electric vehicles are particularly environmentally friendly. I do think that they've kind of disrupted. They've given very rich people another opportunity to spend a lot of money. One of the talk show hosts about a month ago, when everyone was jumping up and down about the price of fuel, came on his show and said, I don't mind paying $4, I don't mind paying $8, I don't mind paying $15 a gallon for petrol because I drive a Tesla, you know. So it's the whole electric car thing is a PR piece de resistance. It's just unbelievable. It's like, I don't think, we know that the environmental cost is in the production. They cost $60,000. I think some of these Teslas, they're not particularly well put together. There's not a lot of opportunities to charge them. If it weren't for the subsidies, they wouldn't be any more cost effective. So the thing that it is a purple cow all on its own, because it's stunning that anybody is buying these at all. But I think the reason people are buying them is for the status that's attached to them, you know, because they're expensive, because, you know, all of these things. So I think Tesla is the purple cow, and it will be interesting to see how long they can sustain that. I mean, Mercedes, BMW, even Ford, even, you know, all of these companies have decades of heritage, you know, and I would say that is the differentiation, is that you buy a Mercedes because you know it's really, really well put together. And
Well,
I think that,
Volkswagen, Toyota, everyone's kind of hybrid now, and
yeah,
like, Toyota's really hit the mark with their RAV4 hybrid and also the Corolla hybrid.
yeah,
So it's possible for most, you know, average car buyers to have some level of an electric car.
yes,
And there's a phase out happening, which is even more interesting. So it's kind of like, well, if I have a car that isn't hybrid, I'm going to struggle to sell it in the next sort of, say, 5 years. So
yeah,
I better sort that out. And that means that you start to see a lot of cars getting decommissioned and a lot of buying of new cars. And to your point, you've now filled the world with replacement car
yes.
as
And the old
opposed to
cars are
having
junk, or the old cars are sitting in landfill somewhere, you know.
along with the wagons that the horses used to tow. So, you know, in defence of replacing things, it does happen. But I'd kind of rather have horses carting me around than, in some ways, than have these weird petrol things. But
Yeah, or even these weird electric things. So I think that, to answer the original question, the differentiation will come down to Mercedes-Benz have done this for decades. You know, if you want to buy a quality vehicle, you buy a Mercedes-Benz. And I think what will happen is that decades of differentiation will overtake Tesla's shiny new thing. I, I, I would imagine, because Tesla are
yeah,
competing directly against them. So actually, everyone knows if you wanted a quality, well manufactured, well put together, reliable car that everyone's going to be impressed by, you buy a Mercedes. And now Mercedes are also entering into the electric market, and it will become a question of, well, do you want the Tesla or do you want the Mercedes? I think Tesla's PR will carry them so far, but eventually those decades of you know differentiation that Mercedes have done, the decades of credibility will catch up. Except if you look at the valuations of these companies, like Tesla is valued at $200 billion or something, and I think the next closest is Toyota, and I'm pulling figures out of the air, but I think it's two or three. Tesla is valued at 2 or 3 times more than these actual brands that have gone on forever and are producing many more cars and are turning over many, many more millions of dollars. So I think this is like the inflationary effect of share prices. You know, it's like, I honestly think that we should be case studying Tesla as one of the purple cow in public
yeah.
relations. And Elon Musk, in
Well,
fact, is, because it's
yeah,
just,
they're doing this. I mean, what a pioneer to kind of put electric in a prestige category, because it really didn't belong there. And so it's really placing it very squarely there and driving, as you say, on status. That is the main driver for a purchase with that.
yeah,
I would say more than any other driving force. But then if you buy Mercedes, they know how to do prestige. That's their bread and butter. So they have earned it over, as you say, a long time. So it's gonna just rise or fall on Elon's character. I think
Yeah.
as well. There's something with this Twitter stuff where he's on top, but we know that you can be on the top of the pile and the bottom of the pile overnight in the world of celebrity. So it is interesting to see that what that means for Tesla with Elon so predominantly at the forefront of those. Because you see it with Branson and Virgin, Bill Gates to a lesser extent with Microsoft because he started to extricate himself sometime before he left, and so Microsoft stands slightly more alone than on its own than with him. But yeah, so I think interesting with Elon and Tesla being so connected and him being so much in the public eye.
Elon Musk
That's
must go down as the greatest PR guy ever, because it just seems to me it's weird. It's not like you wouldn't write it. Like if you were to write a book, The Principles of PR, he's not doing that. But his reputation always is. I mean, now he's taking a bit of a barracking, but I'm sure he will come through it with this Twitter thing. But his reputation is always, people. There are people who absolutely adore him, and there are enough people who tolerate him. So he is always kind of in the ascendancy. It seems to me, he's done some dodgy things like polluting space, like. You don't have to do too many YouTube searches to see these Teslas that aren't put together very well. That's where the crux of the issue is, that when ordinary people who aren't buying this as a status because they've got a spare $60,000 and they want to be seeing this, when they buy the car because they need the car, and it starts letting them down, that's when the brands like Mercedes and BMW and those brands will come through, because they always deliver quality. And as the pioneer, maybe Tesla never could have done that, and maybe they'll get there. Maybe they're working on those issues. I don't know. But that, for me, is the crux, is when ordinary people get their hands on these cars and they realize they're not the Mercedes that they could have bought, then I think that's where it will be interesting.
yeah. And isn't Tesla and SpaceX enough to be trying to operationalize without also having Twitter? So I kind of watch that and go, you've now got three major concerns and all of the subsidiaries of those.
What about the Boring Company?
Yes, exactly. Huge. Yeah. These are big undertakings. So,
but he is the richest man in the world. Do you know what I mean? He does this. This is what I couldn't imagine. Can you imagine how? Well, he's not actually running these businesses. He's always sitting in front of a camera talking about stuff. Do you know what I mean? They've also got the robotics thing. They've got the brain implants things going on. So he's not, I wouldn't say he's operationally in these businesses, because literally every day there's new content. Elon said this, or Elon said that, or Elon spoke to this. He's the PR guy. That's what I think. He is the most amazing PR guy in history.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you look at Google, who, as you say, are bringing home 250 odd billion in a year.
Yep.
That company doesn't have cars and rockets and whatnot. So that company does search. It does search, and that's what it does. It organizes the world's information and makes it accessible. That's what it does. So I think it is. That's where I think that they can be the best at that and stay the best at that, and I kind of like and admire them for that focus that they have. What in hell is Elon's mission? He's got multiple, because he's one's to go to space and Mars, another one is to freedom of speech, another one is the electric car story, and then make tunnels. That's fine, I guess, but I guess I'm just sort of thinking, if you did one thing, like, I'm just a little bit like, is it necessary to do all of the I mean, yeah.
And you know why you're thinking that? is because you really don't quite like what he represents. That's what I think.
I really like Elon, and I love what he's done with each of those companies as it happens. Like the whole SpaceX story, where he's reusing rockets, which NASA hadn't thought of doing.
Yep.
So, there's a whole lot of stuff that he's saying, let's do this whole thing totally differently, and then why not run? But I feel like in my mind, I love a clear mission. I love having one. So it's hard for me to imagine, like you say about Tesla, if some of them are not made well, what are you doing? You're off here doing rockets in space. Shouldn't you be back sorting that out and having, is it quality or isn't it? If I've bought your Tesla from you and I hear that you're worrying about putting one in space, well, I'd rather you made it work first. Thank you very much. So this is where I'm worried for the customer.
Because you are the next level of customer that will need that $60,000 car to be amazing. Like, whereas the first level of customer, they just needed it to be cool. They just needed to get a sense that these weren't necessary purchases. And this is where I think the challenge will come. I think there might be a car which is $10,000 or $15,000 less. The Y version, I don't know. So it will be interesting to see. But every business has these issues. Like, how do you maintain that level of quality? And if you are the pioneer, then not. The master stroke is the positioning, because he didn't come out to the world and say, look, everyone, please buy an electric car. He came out and he went, there's an electric car and it's going to cost you $60,000. Who wants one? And if you don't want one, if I'd be interested to do kind of a study of his messaging, because his messaging is almost always, I didn't expect this to work. I expected this to fail. I don't care if you like it. I don't care if you want it. So it's always like this reverse push kind of message, which is don't like me. I don't care. I'm not interested. Do you know what I mean? Don't like what I do. Don't want what I do. And it seems to be, I don't know if it is that, but that always seems to be his messaging, which is really clever. You can sell stuff like that. You can sell a lot of stuff like that. And what he's really done is sold himself. He can't be operational in these 5 businesses. He says that he is. He is all day, every day, sitting in front of cameras, talking to someone. Every day Elon Musk is in the news, So that's the way I feel about it, is he must be the PR guy, because the PR is amazing. The PR is, it almost doesn't matter what he does, he comes through it, So, yeah, interesting.
Yes, the challenge, that whole story was about all the other brands who are also going electric and what they're going to do about differentiating, because if everyone's electric, that's no longer interesting. It's got to now be, we're electric and something. So Mercedes S-Class has always been the car that has everything and one thing more than any other car has. Yep. And so, they're the ones who put in, automated wipers and, ABS brakes. And so they were kind of like famously the first at doing all of the things. Yes. And so if electric is now being done, do we look to the S-Class and say, what are they going to put in next? Which has been their historical advantage. They've always been the one with the thing that no one else has.
Yeah.
That becomes standard later.
But if you can't buy a $120,000 Tesla that I'm aware of, I mean, maybe you can. Maybe there's one with gold-plated gear knobs or something that don't have gears. But you can buy a $150,000 Mercedes. Do you know what I mean? So that is like it. They will all go, like Ford will go to the affordability, the people's car. Mercedes will go to the top of the range. BMW will go to their, they've got demographics that Tesla just don't have. Still they're not making the numbers. They haven't got apart from, I think, this ancillary, like I can also own this car. Because those people owned Camrys, but what was the Toyota? Was it the Toyota something or other? Was like the green RAV4 car? No,
made a RAV4 hybrid. Oh, the Lexus?
No, there was a hybrid. It was like one of the first hybrid. Yes. I don't know what it was, but everyone had one because it was environmentally friendly. But it wasn't their car. Do you know what I mean? They still had a Porsche, and they still had a this, and they still had a that, and so I think he's done really well with that market. I don't think he's gone beyond that market to everyday people who actually need this car to achieve something for them in their lives. And it will be interesting to see if he can, or they even do, or if they need to. It's astounding. The
It's true. It's
valuation of
just
his
kind
business against their turnover. I'm going to look it up for next time we speak so you can see, because it's also something like 10 or 20 times what they're actually turning over, the valuation of this business. So it's insane.
of
Good.
investing in future, risky
Yes.
business.
Risky business. Investing in, he's just investing in attitude. He's investing in stories. You know, this is my story about the car company. This is my story about the space company. This is my story about the boring company. This is my story about Twitter. This is why I say it's PR, because he's just
Oh yeah. Oh,
generating and riding these stories.
we're do, I mean, and not to, but we're doing a 1 day thing with a client. They wanted to learn a bunch of stuff. Like they gave us a list of about 10 core skills that their team, the division, and we ended up drilling down and saying, you know what, let's do a day on storytelling. So
Yes.
a whole day on storytelling. So they're going to have all these stories that they'll code to the different skill as it goes through. But because we're anchoring every bit of content into a story behind it that they draw out of their own experiences in that organization, so there'll be an origin story,
Yeah.
um, and then there'll be a negotiation story, an influence story, a values story, a how do you lead your team kind of story. All these stories we're going to collect, and then you'll have a portfolio to choose from for the occasion that you're presented with wherever it shows up. So I reckon Elon just has all these stories ready to go. But I really agree with you. The power and importance of stories. We resonate much more strongly with stories than anything else. It's why we don't let facts get in the way of opinions, because we actually preference the opinion because it often comes with emotion, which is what stories do. Stories have that emotion. Facts are far less likely to get us unless there's some emotion that we can put behind the fact,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
a story.
Or associate with it. Do you know what I mean? Like if it affects you, obviously, then it's more effective. You know. And I don't think there is any truth. I think there is only stories. You know. So I think, and this is his other thing, isn't it? That we're all living in some kind of, what's the word he uses? What's the word? We're a simulation. We're all just living in a simulation. You know, and that's really weird and dangerous and interesting. You know, that's where we are. 2022.
Wow, we're in a simulation. Time to go sit under a tree for a while, I think, on that note.
Yeah. Okay, super
Oh,
cool. This has been amazing. Yep. I think we got to the end. Did we get to the end?
yep.
We did. This has been amazing, really interesting, really cool. As always, I will see you on Monday, but we will see everyone here in a couple of weeks' time, if that's cool. I'm going to
Yeah.
pretend that I'm going to send you the invitation before, but it will probably just arrive the day before, like they always do. But hopefully, you'll be available.
I hope so. And if I'm not, it's because I'm super busy because I've implemented your advice and suddenly I have absolutely no time because it's all with clients.
Okay, super cool. All right, then. I will see you. I'll see you next week and in a couple of weeks. Cheers, Mel. You're an absolute star.
Nice. Nice. Talk soon. Take care.
Okay.